Good evening. That's enough. Calm down. Good evening. Welcome to Ben Fent. I'm John Richards. Tonight we're exploring the strange and mysterious world that is the Australian Labor Party. And to guide us through, we have two members of the party, both of whom will soon be running as federal candidates in the election whenever that should be called. We have over here the multifaceted Michael Danby, who will be standing for Melbourne Ports, a seat that takes in Albert Park and St Kilda, and Nicola Roxon, an industrial lawyer who will be standing in Gellibrand, an area that includes Williamstown and Yarraville. Please make them both welcome. We've heard a lot recently about what parties don't stand for. There seems to be a thing in politics generally that people will go on and on about what they don't stand for, whether it be single mothers or other issues. I thought maybe it'd be nice if we could start with what the LP actually does stand for, if there'd be some, what it is positively for. Michael, would you like to start us off?
Social conscience, social change. We're in favour of people being able to go into nursing homes without higher charges. We're against regressive taxation like the GST. We're in favour of people who've been really squeezed in the 25 to 45,000 income bracket getting tax credits. We're in favour of Australia being a lean, mean exporting machine, but we're also in favour of Australia not turning into a country where people live outside, wealthy apartments in cardboard boxes. Mm-hmm. We want to become like America, an export-oriented nation, but not a mean country. And the Labor Party thinks that it's the typical muddling social democrats that we are, that we think we can have the best of both worlds.
Nicola,
Yeah, I think the really key things that the Labor Party stands for, and we've been going through a bit of a process of listening. I mean, we had a big loss obviously in 1996, and listening to what people really want, and going back to some of our core values about making sure people have got health care and access to education and an opportunity for a job and security when they've got a job. The really basic things which probably don't sound that glamorous when you just actually limit it to that, but they are really fundamental things where we've got pretty different views to the other parties.
But it would be hard to imagine the other party saying, no, we don't think people should have a job and we don't think people should have an education.
I know, but I think you also have to look at what sort of policies the Liberals in particular, or the current government, are putting in place to actually back up those commitments. I mean, you can't sort of slash funding to labour market programs and say we're trying to support the unemployed and we're trying to find jobs, but we're not going to put any money into it or be sort of creative about how we do it. And the same with health and education. I mean, you've got to actually follow it up with some sort of commitment to those areas. Probably sounds like the same old politics, but they are pretty core issues. And I think the Labor Party's view on rights, if you like, rights of lots of different groups in the community is something that we've got a very proud sort of history of as well.
Okay, we were just discussing before that the Hugh Mackay's Mind and Mood survey, which came out a couple of months ago, found that most people are actually now completely disinterested in politics, and that they can't actually see a difference between the major parties, and that is one of the reasons, obviously, for the rise of Hansonism. So why is it, do you think, that people are finding it so hard to see any difference between Labor and Liberal?
Do you want to start on that?
I think during the years of the Keating and Hawke governments, there was a trend towards the political centre that meant that those differences were perhaps obscured. But I think they're in sharper relief now that we're in opposition. I mean, we're not in favour of the privatisation of Telstra. We're not in favour of aggressive taxation, and we had a wake-up call in 1996 that long predated Pauline Hanson, and I think the Labor Party's learnt the lesson, and I think Nicola and I sit with Simon Crean in favour of building up Australian industry and picking out industries where Australia ought to be supporting our employees and our exports. The Liberals don't want to do that. They say the free market should just reign. Well, I'm sorry, it's also not my experience, by the way, John, too, that people are disinterested in politics. Mm-hmm. I think that it's up to us, the younger sort of generation of the Labor Party, to get out there and motivate people, and I certainly know in Melbourne Ports people are very excited at the moment with the prospect of the federal election coming on, and they're very agitated about the One Nation group in particular.
Well, if we can, since we obviously are going to head that way anyway, we can go to One Nation early. What is it about? I mean, one of the things is or often said about Pauline Hanson is that people like her because she's not a politician.
Yeah.
And we also see that the independents, there's a rise of independents. Is there in fact just a general groundswell against the established political movement with the two parties, opposing each other, and is it not time for a change of politics generally?
I think one of the things is that, I don't know, take for example industrial relations. There's a bit of complacency because we have had a really strong award system and we've had sort of certain securities and protections. It's not until you have a change of government and you see the sorts of things that have been happening down at the ports, at the docks, that actually people understand the differences between the parties. So the differences are there, but I think in day-to-day life, a lot of the time they don't come out, or people aren't particularly interested until they have a reason to get motivated about it. I suppose One Nation obviously strikes a chord with some people because it sounds different, it looks different. But I mean, as new candidates, I in particular feel like I'm part of the new generation of the Labor Party, and there is a different look, there are different answers. We have to answer people's questions when they ask them. That's the most common thing you get. Politicians won't answer our questions. We've got to deal with that and obviously express ourselves better and make sure that we're explaining our policies. They're ones that we can be proud of. We're just obviously not necessarily getting through on some of the things.
Well, that's one of the things I've been saying, is that I'm very proud of the Labor Party. I'm very proud of Australia as it is. I'm very proud of Melbourne. I'm very proud of Victoria. We are not like the people who support Pauline Hanson, and I'm sorry. I just have to say to people, if you want to make a choice between that kind of world that she represents, intolerance, opposition to minorities, or the big, happy, cosmopolitan tent that we represent, then, that's the choice. And I want to make that clear to people and make them understand that, the Labor Party stands for the sort of proud, cosmopolitan, tolerant Australia. And, we're the people who are going to stop Hansonism in its tracks. I hate to sound a bit militant about it, but I know that's how a lot of Victorians feel. And a lot of them are supporting the Labor Party because of it.
Some people have suggested that Hanson actually came around in some ways as a result of the previous Labor government, that they claim that Keating had stopped debate on immigration on Aboriginal issues and effectively had created a sort of put a pot on a kettle, if you like, that then exploded in this sort of right-wing extremism that we're seeing now. Do you think there's any validity to that argument?
I don't think anyone should be stopped from saying whatever they like, but Paul Keating had a very strong view on Aboriginal rights, and I think, if you look at the history of what has happened to the Aboriginal people in the last 2 centuries, we have a record to sort of really address, and I don't retreat from his view of the world. At the same time, I also don't see it as reasonable that all of the columnists in Australia, a lot of whom are very conservative, were having their rights somehow prescribed by the Labor Party. I just think there came to be a dominant view with one government in power that Aboriginals were entitled to more rights than we conceded in the past.
I think also when you say, did we create One Nation, who created One Nation, it's interesting that the same question and debate isn't really had about who created the Greens or the Democrats or Phil Cleary, other independents that do seem to have got a bit of attention but never had the sort of treatment that Pauline Hanson has had.
But on the other hand, they haven't won as many votes as she has in the local, state election.
I guess the Queensland election is maybe a different thing, but when she won her seat in the federal parliament, it was one seat. It wasn't anything more than that. And the other independents have been in that position too, but never had the same sort of attention. So it is a bit difficult. Does the media create it? Do the parties create it? Do the public create it because that's what they want? I don't know. But certainly in Jellybrand, there's a very broad ethnic community from all sorts of sort of generations of immigration, and there's very, very strong sort of opposition to One Nation, and there is also a lot of concern about what will happen if there is a rise of the party in Victoria, because up until now they've felt very comfortable and welcome in Melbourne, and I think in Victoria generally, and there's a bit of a fear that might change if people that haven't been interested in politics don't get out and say we oppose this.
So how is the LP viewing One Nation? Are you seeing it as a thing that will will come and go, as other parties have, or are you taking it seriously as a new force in Australian politics?
Well, my personal view is you've got to take anything seriously. There obviously are concerns in the community and some of the issues that are being raised by One Nation, people are, it strikes a chord with them. What we're saying is we have already had policies on those issues. We've already developed those areas. One Nation is sort of picking out any sort of populist policy that they can find from any of the groups that, takes their attention on that week. We don't think that's a long-term answer, but I do think you've got to take it seriously. I'm sure it will come and go. I hope it does, and I'll certainly be campaigning hard against all of my opponents, but I don't believe in the sort of bigoted views that are being expressed by One Nation. I think you have to take a hard line on it.
I think that's a very important thing for people who are interested in current affairs, like the people who watch this show to understand, is that they are a phenomenon that is going to be here for some time. If you project the opinion polls onto, say for instance, the Senate vote, we'll have 3 or 4 One Nation senators around for 6 years. D1 and D2 maybe, David Ettridge and David Oldfield, both of them. Maybe they'll end up leading One Nation. And people have to really think about the implications of that. Kim Beazley calls them 3 cats in a sack, the Liberal Party, the National Party and One Nation. Ross Lightfoot, their senator from West Australia, was talking about them being in coalition together in the Senate. That's why I say to people, the Labor Party stands against One Nation. If you're voting in the Senate at this election, it's a referendum on the big, tolerant, cosmopolitan Australia that all of us are comfortable with, or the sort of narrow, bigoted version of Australia back to pre-war, I would say, to the 1930s that unfortunately One Nation represents.
So, sorry, bear with me. I'm just looking over to see how much time we have left. I'd like to move on to the gay vote next, but I think we'll wait until just after we come back from the break so we have time to discuss that fully. So I was just going to say, I'm curious why you think Hanson personally has been such a figure when other politicians can't get that sort of emotional reaction that she gets.
It's like wanting us to be able to tap into the Australian psyche, or a small part of it. I don't really know the answer to it. I think it's a complex thing. But I do think that there's a big message for the main political parties that we have to take, which is people don't think we're listening. And one of the things as a newer and younger politician that we've got to do, both of us have got to do, is make sure we're listening.
Okay, we'll have to cut you off there and we'll be back after the break. You're watching Ben Fent. We're discussing the ALP with Michael Danby and Nicola Roxon, and now I think it's baby kissing time. Both of you are in seats which have large
No babies. Yeah. I have promised no babies. Unless I'm related to them, no baby kissing.
So baby kissing's out?
Baby kissing's out. I don't know about Michael, but baby kissing is out for me.
No, I like playing with little kids. I spend my weekends off taking them out to things around Melbourne Ports.
Yeah, but they're your kids. That's okay.
I am friends' kids.
Look, I'm sorry, I think Michael's just won his seat and you've just lost yours, Nicola.
I'm not saying I don't like kids. I just don't want to kiss them all, that's all.
Okay, but you have large gay and lesbian populations in your seats. Why should gay men and lesbians vote for you? For the LP generally? What have you ever done for us?
Well, I guess, what have I ever done for us? I mean, my background, I'm an industrial lawyer. I do a lot of work in the discrimination area, and one of the things I have done a lot of work in is with gay discrimination, mostly in employment, although there's sort of growing areas with sort of services and accommodation and things. But I think we have got to push, as lawyers working in the area as well, for changes to the law. And that's one of the things that I would like to be actively involved in within the Labor Party. But I think that we've had a pretty good record on discrimination law, and that being an issue that we regard as important. So that's a very specific thing. But I mean, I guess there's a whole lot of reasons that the gay community should vote for us the same way a whole lot of other communities should.
I think a lot of people make individual judgments about people, Nicola, too. They sort of, that gay people are like every other voter. They vote on the wide range of issues. I think the basic judgment they make about you is that you can't be homophobic, so they have to know that there's sympathetic people there who are the candidates for the main parties from the seats, particularly in our cases, people who have margins where they're likely to win. So I think that's very important, that the individual is a sympathetic person who may not be gay themselves, but is tolerant and active about it. So you just can't.
We've got a bit of an image problem probably in the Labor Party with that, because there's the sort of blue singlet, beer swilling, macho type of image. But I think that really doesn't portray what the Labor Party stands for with, individual rights and embracing a whole lot of different communities. I have a sort of a personal view about it. To me, it's not a big issue, because it's been something that I've dealt with sort of with my work in discrimination for 10 years, and it sort of seems like a non-issue. But I guess we do have to get our message across.
So under an ALP government, could we expect to see a recognition of same-sex couples?
I think that there is a recognition already about it. I think that there were some changes with under the Labor government with the public sector entitlements for public servants, recognition of gay couples and those sorts of things. I do think we've got a further way to go.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of complicated areas with sort of superannuation.
I was going to move to superannuation. Obviously been a big thing recently.
Superannuation is becoming a more important issue, because more people have superannuation and more people have more superannuation. And it's something that you get people from seats like ours, where you do have a strong gay community. We're the people who have to push within the Labor Party. We're the people who have to develop the policy. We're the people who have to take it further. And I think people who know us in those two seats believe we're the kinds of people who will do that.
Can we trust you to do that, Michael, though? I mean, can we...
We can trust us.
Non-call promise here.
You get a core promise that these two people are sort of your modern, cosmopolitan, tolerant, social democratic types who will push this. What I can't promise you is that we'll be successful, because we have to sort of deal with our own political party, which is a very big political animal and this kind of stuff.
So you can't say there's a plank in the LP platform that these are issues they are.
There is a plank in the platform which is also recognising individuality and recognising rights. I think the problem is, certainly for me, and I think for a lot of other people in the Labor Party, we've taken the recognition of rights for granted. What we've seen with One Nation that we were talking about before is even recognising rights of different communities is under threat. So we're going back and arguing about basic recognition. I actually thought we were moving beyond that, and we were moving into, let's look at the economic rights, let's look at what people are entitled to, because that is becoming a bigger issue. And the commitment we can make is that that's something that we hold dear to us and understand that it's important. Everybody, there's different generations, there's a whole lot of different groups that don't necessarily recognise or have some experience in the particular area. So it's got to be pushed forward.
Well, Nicola's right. I mean, we're talking about, according to One Nation, sending refugees back. I mean, Sir Ravi Pabbo and Sir Gustav Nossel we put back on the next plane back to wherever they came from, according to her. If we send back the refugees, they came here without speaking any English. I mean, to actually get onto important topics like same-sex couples, superannuation rights, and being able to transfer them. We can't talk about that kind of thing at the moment, because the debate is being so much centred on, debates we all thought had been settled.
So do you feel that's further off now than it was, say, 5 years ago?
Oh, I think a lot depends on the election.
Conservative government for, I think, it does. I mean, it makes a big difference about what issues are actually going to be concentrated on. And obviously, I mean, there's a whole lot of things that we would need to deal with, and how you prioritise those things is always going to be difficult. But you want to have people, presumably in Parliament, that can cover a whole range of areas and are committed to and interested in a whole range of areas.
If I can move back to something you just mentioned then, that people vote for parties obviously for a wide range of reasons. We've been talking about the gay vote. We often talk about the gay vote as if it's one mass block. Does the ALP believe in such a thing as the gay vote, and does it actively try and follow it?
I think it actively courts it, but it doesn't necessarily believe that it's a block vote. I think the gay community is as sophisticated and diverse as other communities. In fact...
Well, it's a bit annoying because it's kind of like the women's vote. Yes, there are issues that are important to women, but we're all different too. We don't necessarily fall into a particular category.
Bit more geographically concentrated than... I mean, women are everywhere. It happens to be that in some major seats there is a higher concentration of the gay community, so you have to concentrate on those kinds of
They're not everywhere.
issues.
There's still not many of us in Parliament and in the courts and all of those sorts of places.
Would it worry you, though, for either of your seats, would there be a problem balancing, say, the interest of trying to appeal to a gay community at the same time as not alienating other sections of the community?
I think you have to be cautious and respect people's views, but I don't think that you can compromise on things you believe in just because you might offend one particular group. I think that when you're talking about fundamental issues, you have to say what you believe. Sure, you might want to be explain it. You might want to be careful about how you present it. But I don't think you can say, well, no, I don't believe in gay rights because I'm worried that I might offend this part of the community. People have to accept that that's something that the Labor Party and individual candidates stand for.
I think people are more tolerant these days than One Nation would have us believe. And my experiences amongst people in Melbourne ports is that it's that good old Aussie fair go mentality. It's very strong, and I think you can reconcile people's rights too, and it's part of our responsibility to do that.
Okay, so we'll be looking forward to seeing you in the dunking tank at the Midsummer Carnival. But if I can cross over now, we're going to take some questions from the audience.
In silk pyjamas?
Oh, please. So I believe we have a question over here. Lindsay, our beautiful microphone monitor, has moved into place. Yes, please.
I was wondering, under the Liberal government, the amount of gay people who have overseas-born partners who are wanting to immigrate here, those numbers have been slashed, and the criteria in accepting these spouses from overseas countries have been made far more rigorous. I wonder, would a new Labor government re-examine the criteria for same-sex partnerships with regard to overseas relationships? And would you increase that the quota back to where it was under the Keating government?
There's a whole debate about the level of immigration, which is the pressure and the problem that the Hansen forces are causing. I'd generally be in favour of resuming the level of immigration that existed in the latter years of the Hawke and Keating governments, but that is a debate that's sort of still taking place within the Labor Party. I think the criteria, more liberal criteria in all areas, including in family reunion, something that the Labor Party would be looking at. I know that there are so many injustices that are being perpetrated on people now that I'm sure this is an area that's very much the same, and I'd favour us going back and having a look at exactly the same formulations that existed in the past. It's
interesting, Michael, you're saying that you think we're a more tolerant society than One Nation would have us suspect, but then at the same time you seem to be warning us that we can't. It almost sounds like you're saying that the gay community has to wait longer for things that we've already waited for quite a long time.
Well, the gay community has to realise that, like all Australians, there's a lot at risk at this next federal election. There's a lot at risk because if the three-ring circus takes over Australia, I know a lot of decent small L Liberals in the Liberal Party, including probably the Premier, Mr Kennett, will say, I don't know whether he's a small L Liberal, but he's something. He's had a good stance against One Nation. These people will say, we don't have anything to do with Hansen or co. But we've got Senator Lightfoot on the radio this morning saying one thing. We've got what they did in Queensland with One Nation, putting 8 of their 11 people into Parliament. We've got them saying that they might preference to One Nation ahead of Kim Beazley in the seat of Brand. Now, to any reasonable person, including in the gay community, this builds up a picture that these people might form some kind of informal coalition with these people. And this election, for all of those people, including in the gay community, who are interested in rights as we've got them now, this is a referendum. Do you want Australia to go backwards, or do you want us to stay the kind of cosmopolitan, tolerant society we are?
Okay, so there's another question with Lindsay.
You've talked about Australia being a cohesive society, Pauline Hanson's targeted single mothers, she's targeted migrants, and it would seem that in the absence of any policies, One Nation is going to continue targeting groups in the community they see as vulnerable. And I'm interested in the views of either of you about what do you think this is going to do, if it continues, what it's going to do in the long term to social cohesion and the long-term effects on the community.
Well, I think this actually goes back to the question, John, that you asked before the break about what does the Labor Party stand for. I mean, Pauline Hanson has been picking out groups that have been disadvantaged over a long period of time, and it's been something that the Labor Party has said, we actually want an Australia where we have a community that can have basic rights, and if that means extra assistance is needed for particular groups, then that's one of the things that we want to be able to do. And if it's Indigenous Australians, or if it's the ethnic community, or if it's the gay community that have particular interests, I'm not sure that the gay community probably has recognition issues, not necessarily the same sort of disadvantage issues and socio-economic issues. And I think the Labor Party really has got to fight for those things. One of the things I was going to say in answer to a question you asked Michael as well is, why should the gay community really sort of pay any attention to this? I think that if the gay community wants to be heard as one voice, and your listeners or viewers might think about it too, they need to get out and be politically engaged as well. Come knocking on our doors and other parties' doors and, get engaged in the debate, because unfortunately some of the things that happen in politics are for whoever yells the loudest.
Okay,
Can I just say one thing about that? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German pastor who was incarcerated in Dachau, said that they came for the communists and I wasn't a communist. They came for the unionists and I wasn't a unionist. When they came for me, there wasn't anyone else left to protest. It's not Weimar Germany, but whether you were the Yellow Star or the Pink Triangle, we know what happened in the end, and they start targeting single mothers and Aborigines and immigrants and this kind of stuff. I know Mardi Gras made a great fool of Pauline by replaying her It's Not Natural, but the gay community ought to watch out, because I think they're on the radar screen of One Nation.
I'll have to stop you, Michael, because we're out of time. Thank you, Nicola Roxon. Thank you, Michael Danby.
Thanks very much.